bad trade paperback, flocking to the
I am joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price, Andre Owen, Fred Kennedy, Chip Zdarsky. Chip, thanks for coming. What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and tonight I'm joined by Caleb Palmquist, and we're going to talk tonight about Dragon Grit #1, their current Kickstarter campaign. Caleb, thanks for coming on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, it was really fun having you last time. I actually really enjoyed your Unicorn Hunter book, and it was something I didn't expect, and I like I said, I really enjoyed it. I am certain Dragon Grit will be equally enjoyable, and I think the people think that too already. So just to start with, Caleb, for the folks out there watching with us now, or in the next 16 days while the campaign is live, for those who haven't heard your name or seen your face, who is Caleb Palmquist?
Sure. My name is Caleb Palmquist. I am a comic book writer. I've been writing comics for the past 8 years, and I mainly write fantasy comics. I'm best known for my series Unicorn Vampire Hunter. And yeah, now I've got a new book that's about dragons and the cowboys that ride them.
I love it. And you know what? Just to get into that real quick, I'm going to bring it up on screen because I've got the campaign here. And it is doing smashingly well. Was it a 30-day campaign?
It was like a 31-day campaign. I wanted to end on a Friday. I've been hearing some talk. Creators are always talking about things like little tweaks, like what day to end on or start on or whatever. And someone said, Friday night is a good time because it's payday. And I was like, all right. So
good idea.
So I extended the campaign by 1 day so that it would end on a Friday night.
I dig it. And I guess the response has been rather huge. Were your previous campaigns sort of met similarly? Is this a unique thing to you when it comes to the support?
So this one is actually breaking a lot of records in terms of backer numbers.
Right on.
I would say that what this campaign is reminding me of actually is the response that the first 2 Unicorn Vampire Hunter campaigns I did got. There was a brand new thing people are excited about. I would say that I'm getting a better response now than I got to those. So it feels very good. I think, it's to answer your question, it's similar to the vibe from before, but just more so. I think more people have found this. A lot of people who back my other stuff, but also a huge number of new backers.
Nice.
Kickstarter analytics lets you see kind of like who are the new backers versus returning backers, and I've gotten a lot of new backers, so that's very exciting.
Amazing. I do enjoy hearing about the analytics and sort of the uniqueness of it. I know it's sort of early in the interview to ask, but what is sort of, is there a backer in a country that you wouldn't have expected or that you saw come in and were like, oh, wow, people from over there are ordering it?
That's a good question. I can look at it right now, and I can tell you, I get backers from all over the world always. That's the great thing about Kickstarter, but it looks like, I got my usual suspects. I always get a good number from Canada, the UK, Australia. Australia is a big one.
Cool.
And then I've got, it looks like one from Serbia, Finland, the Philippines, Malta, Norway. So sort of all over the place, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I don't want to hark on the fan response too much, but from what you have seen online, how are people responding to it with whatever comments they've left, or however they've maybe retweeted it and left a little comment?
I'm not sure if people are retweeting it because I'm really chronically not on Kickstarter. I mean, sorry, not on Twitter. I am chronically on Kickstarter, just not Twitter. Some people left some very fun comments. I think besides the preview that you've read, not a lot of people have read more than that. The book is in the home stretch right now. Kay Woolheiser, the artist, is finishing like the last 2 pages right now.
Ooh, awesome.
And so it's going to be done before the end of the campaign. And so, I'm looking forward to seeing like what people say, because obviously that preview that you've seen is really kind of like a chase scene. It's like a shootout scene in the sky with dragons, which I think turned out really great. But once you get into the meat of the book, you're going to get into the story and the characters, and so, but I mean, based on the comments I've got so far, it feels like people really like the idea of cowboys riding dragons. It's
Yeah.
I gotta think that somewhere that's been done to some degree, but not that I've seen. I know there was a book about like an alternate World War I where there were dragons involved at some point. The name of that comic escapes me right now, but this one, but yeah, so I think people are, seeing it as something unique and different, and I think I'm sort of slowly becoming known as kind of like a mashup writer, where I take kind of disparate concepts and put them together: unicorns and vampires, dragons and cowboys. And so, yeah, I think the response is very just people being very excited. So hopefully I don't let them down with the story that I've written with my co-writer, who happens to be my wife, actually, Lorelei Jonasson.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one, absolutely, the mashups that you seem to come up with are fascinating. The pages you sent over to me, it's gripping. It definitely pulls you in. I'm assuming that's like the first, I think it was 7 pages, the first 7 of the book, right?
Yes, I think I sent you the first 7 pages, which are the same 7 pages that are on the Kickstarter. If you're listening and you want to check it out.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I can actually scroll down and show these real quick and easy. Then I will absolutely get on that. Yeah, I think the art on this is fabulous, by the way. The way the characters look, the way that they function, like the way that they're physically positioned in the world, that looks good, it feels good, they have like a weight to them. Yeah, it was just cool. And like the style, the way it was pulled off, especially like that, like you can't get much cooler than that. So well, I guess you know what, you mentioned your writing partner on this one is your partner,
Yep.
your wife. How did that come along? Was that just like, hey, honey, I'd really like to work with you? Or was that just like an idea popped up and you kind of kept feeding on each other? How'd that all turn into what you've got now?
It definitely started as we wanted to write something together. The idea of writing something together came before the idea for the actual comic. She's a novelist, and she's really into fantasy. And originally we were going to write a novel together. And as we developed this idea, we plotted it out and we wrote about half of a novel of this novel. And then we decided that we wanted to see, illustrations of what we were doing. And then that kind of led into like, well, I think this would actually be really cool as a comic book. And around that time, I was finishing up working with Kay Woolheiser on my graphic novel I did last year, which was called The Knight and the Lion. And she was available, and she liked the idea. And so then we kind of went from there. But yeah, my wife really likes dragons. Like dragons are, if my favorite like fantasy creature is a unicorn, for her it's dragons.
Right on.
And so and she loves Dragon Rider stories, and I of course love westerns. I grew up reading like dime store western novels and watching western movies, and so we thought it would be cool if we combined those two things.
100%. I mean that's fantastic. I'm very curious because your average fantasy novel, I'd read somewhere it's like what 300,000 to 350,000 words. Um, I'm assuming if even you got like you said through half of that, so 150,000 ish words, um, that's a lot for a comic book. How many of these issues are, if not written like in full, plotted?
We have plotted a 10-issue arc,
Ooh.
and that covers more or less the novel that we had planned out. Now, of course, it's a comic book, so that doesn't include every detail that we originally planned. But um, yeah, we had a 10-issue plot plan, and then we came up with a 5-issue version
Oh, okay.
in case it didn't go like totally gangbusters. But honestly, given the fact that it's been my most successful launch ever, in terms of backer numbers, at the very least, I'm feeling confident. And like I said, we already have that first issue basically done, and um, Kay is going to be starting on issue 2 as of the beginning of April. So we're cruising right on through, um, and so I'm very optimistic that we'll get to those 10 issues. But yeah, we have it all plotted out. Those scripts aren't necessarily 100% dialed in,
Mhm.
but we're working from an outline that we came up with for that novel originally. So most of the ideas are all very well fleshed out already.
Oh, so now it's just a matter for you two to go through and sort of take what is left, or perhaps what was
Hmm.
left, given what you've got, and just sort of fit them in place, and then figure out what would visually look good and what you have to draw.
Yeah, and I'm
That's
a really big fan of decompressed storytelling in comics, and so a lot of it is like, what scenes are really important, and how can we make those scenes um, carry the emotional weight that we need them to carry.
I dig it. Um, you know what? Then a big important question, Caleb. What is Dragon Grit essentially about?
Well, the main character, her name is Vera, and she is an ex-outlaw who is trying to sort of make a living on the straight and narrow with her dragon Blaze. And so they run star routes, which are basically dangerous delivery routes out west, where that are essentially too dangerous for other delivery people to make. But as the railways come in, that star routes are
Ooh.
coming sort of becoming obsolete. And so she's looking for other ways to make a living. She runs into a young man named Robin, who has just inherited his father's estate. He's been studying out east. His father owned quite a booming business right on the frontier. He's inheriting that business, and part of what he inherited is a dragon that's been in their family for generations, and now keeps wandering off. Um, Vera figures out pretty quickly that that dragon is actually trying to wander to her ancestral dragon graveyard, sort of like how elephants have elephant
Hmm.
graveyards. And so
Huh.
Robin hires Vera to escort them. The problem is they have to go by foot because Chanterelle, the dying dragon, has can't fly, and only Chanterelle knows where the dragon graveyard is. And as Chanterelle can't talk, they have to follow her on foot across the wilderness, and all the
That's
while they're being pursued by a dangerous gang of outlaws led by an old rival of Vera's.
I love it. That is awesome. Like I definitely think you're taking elements from some of like the coolest Western stories. You're making such great tension and conflict like baked right into that. I love it. I'm excited for this book. This is super cool. Um,
Thank you.
I guess an important question. Often in a lot of Western stories, the cowboy, the mercenary, the whoever our protagonist is, whatever their job is, um, they're often depicted with their mighty steed, who's their life companion. So who might this wonderful beast be? And other than being an awesome way to get around, what kind of impact do they have on the story and on the characters?
So Blaze is Vera's fire dragon, and Blaze is a wild dragon. Now, if you've seen the movie Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, 2002 Matt Damon movie,
Classic.
yeah, um, it's got some. Blaze has some of those vibes because Blaze is a wild dragon who no one could tame except for Vera. Um, and so they sort of formed a bond there. Now, in our story, dragons are much more like horses than they are like the dragons that you might see in like really high fantasy dragon rider stories, because in a lot of those stories the dragons like can speak telepathically, or they have these like
Yeah.
soul bonds. And in our story, it's much more like the bond between a man and his horse. Like the dragons in our stories are probably smarter than horses, but not like as smart as people. And so, yeah, that we're actually going to, throughout the series, really delve into the backstory of how Vera and Blaze met and how they formed their bond together. And so essentially there are three main human characters in the story. There's Vera, there's Robin, the young man, and then there's Jack, who is her old rival and the leader of the gang. But then also each of those characters has a dragon companion. Vera has Blaze, her fire dragon. Robin has Chanterelle, the family mist dragon. And then Jack, the outlaw, also has a fire dragon named Ruin. Who is, there. And so each of those dragons are also major characters in the story, and the relationships with their riders or their humans. And so, yeah, definitely the bond part is a big part of the story.
I love it. And the moment you sort of mentioned the dragons in this series are going to operate similar to horses, my brain immediately went to like an old saloon with like, instead of horses tied up out front, like a bunch of dragons. I'm assuming from the fight scene that breaks out here, dragons are not like a super rare thing. They're not like the legendary red dragon, the one that's left from 1,000 years or whatever. And they also appear smaller, more like I might not be 100% correct on this, but like a drake. I believe drakes are smaller.
Yeah. So Lorelai, my co-writer and my partner, is like really big into world building, and for her, everything has to make logical sense. There, like she's developed long backstories for every character, including minor characters, and like the rules of the world, and which is really cool.
Yeah.
But so one of the things about our world is that there are wild dragons and there are domestic dragons, and that's kind of like wolves and dogs in that sense. And so some people ride wild dragons, but it's much more difficult. And so in this scene that we're looking at right here, these bandits are actually riding domestic dragons who are trained for this kind of thing. But they're like a stock breed dragon. As you can see in this scene, those dragons don't breathe fire. Whereas Blaze, who is a stallion of a wild fire dragon, absolutely does.
Oh, yeah. And I also want to say, like, the one thing that popped out to right away to me visually, and I'm very sure this was planned, is Blaze is like a bright red, which, fire-breathing dragon, perfect. But the other dragons, they're sort of muted tones. Not only are it's like a brown, a light purple, and like a dark blue, but those are they're not like, a velvety royal purple. It's like a sort of grayish undertone. I'm assuming that theme or that look as well is a part of the fact that they're maybe not as powerful, or they don't have beyond flying giant lizards here. They're not super powered.
Yeah, that's true. So there's definitely a range of dragons, and that says something about the rider who can ride a dragon that's more powerful. And then as we go through the story, we're also going to meet other dragons that are even beyond what a talented rider might be able to tame, because we might encounter things like your classic treasure dragons and things like that, and also smaller dragons. There's a lot to explore there for sure. And yeah, you're spot on that these dragons that these bandits are riding are really your like stock trade riding, like corralling dragons.
Very cool. I guess when it came to designing the dragons, like I mentioned, to me they look more like a drake just because they're smaller.
Hmm.
To be absolutely as nerdy as I can, and do correct me if I'm wrong. Um, like the type of dragons that these appear to be, they're four-legged, so that's like
Hmm.
a classic dragon. And then there's,
Hmm.
maybe you don't have them in this, but there's wyverns which only have the hind legs,
Yep.
and then the drakes, which are the smaller guys. So from the sounds of it, in this world, and your partner would be obviously able to tell us right away. I'm assuming there's a large range of these beasts that we may or may not run into. Um, when it came to designing exactly how they look, and like all the different sort of armatures following sort of the bone structures like the bat wings they do here, um, was there any particular inspiration? Was it just organically the idea sort of popped up for you both? How'd you
Oh,
arrive at that?
we went through a lot of design steps with Kay, the artist. We definitely went through a whole process of like, what do we want these dragons to look like? And we knew that we didn't want them to be like Dungeons and Dragons, like over the top, scaly, like scary, grotesque almost. That's not what we were going for. But we also didn't want to go for the like over the top cutesy thing of like How to Train Your Dragon, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were kind of looking for something more in between. And we also really were trying to capture the feeling of like these are beasts of burden that are trained and bred by people, in the same way that horses or oxen or mules are. And so like, what would a dragon look like if that was their purpose and that's how they were bred and trained? And then also, if you scroll down a little bit, you see Blaze here has like this puff of fur on his chest. And later when you meet Chanterelle, you'll see she's got some fur on her. And so like basically we wanted like dragons that were cool and fierce, but like a little bit softened, a little bit like how
Interesting.
approachable for people. Now, the big exception to that, I would say, when you later on, which who you won't meet until issue 2, I think, but Ruin Jack's dragon is definitely a little more bulky and hard, to match his character.
I dig it. And yeah, I noticed that, like you said, there's fur there. There's a bit of a mane or something. Um, and I think it's such an interesting idea because also for a creature to be like not dog like, but man's best friend, the companion animal. I couldn't imagine a large, scaly, rough animal being, huggable or
Hmm.
reliable, or you don't want to lean on them in times of need. Um, so it's an interesting way to make them more uh, comfortable when it comes to interacting with them, and stuff like that. And just the expressiveness as well was really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
Kay does an amazing job with that.
yeah. Uh, then I guess you know what, we're 25 almost minutes in. What I do want to cover next, Caleb, is basically the cost. Now, obviously, the book's getting made. You're, as mentioned, like almost 4 times over backed, which again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're 2 pages from being done the book, so relatively speaking, the people who back it should get it very soon. But for those who've maybe never backed a book, never gotten a Kickstarter before, What is the minimum for them to get in on it, and what do they get for it? And then what's sort of more extravagant out there for them to be able to enjoy?
Sure. So you can get the digital book for $8. And then we have our what I'm calling our standard edition, which is the edition of the book that will always be in print as long as I'm printing them. And that's got Kay's cover, and then I have two collector's edition covers. Now, this is where if you want something that you're going to get exclusive to this Kickstarter, to this campaign, that you're not going to be able to get in the future. So this is two different covers, and they both have a foil stamped logo, and then they're also going to have foil stamped limited edition numbering on the bottom, so you know that's a unique item. And those versions will only be printed during this campaign. So I'm gonna, between this campaign and then the backer kit surveys, you'll have a chance to add extra copies on the survey. But then once I get the final order number, I'm ordering that many. I mean, usually I'll order like 5 extra just in case one gets damaged or something, but like pretty much ordering that many, and then that's it. So then in the future, if you want to pick up this book, you'll be getting that standard edition. And so that's just my way of saying, like, a lot of people, when they back a Kickstarter, they're supporting something early. They want to know they have something unique. And so that's kind of what that is. On the variant cover is drawn by David Hahn, with inks by Carl Kiesel and colors by Ryan Cody. And you may know those names from their Kickstarter series Impossible Jones, or you may know Carl Kiesel from his work in Marvel and DC Comics in the last 30 years. But they did a great job with that. And then we also have a print and a sticker that you can get, and you can get those separately or as this whole bundle. So yeah, those are kind of the price points, to get in. And then of course on the campaign, if you think my work looks cool and you haven't read it before, or you've missed one of my books, I have all of my graphic novels available. So you can pick those up too, and including The Knight and the Lion, which is a thing that Kay and I collaborated on last year, which is an adaptation of a 13th century Arthurian romance about a knight who becomes best friends with a lion and goes on adventures together.
Well, all right, that is awesome. You are definitely one for figuring out how to maximize your fantasy output. And keep at it, Caleb. Everything that I've been able to read of yours so far has been heart touching. I have, because my main intro to you was through Unicorn Vampire Hunter, where it's a little bit cartoony, a little bit romantic, but at its core, it's fairly dark, fairly adult. It's just being put on in a very fluffy way, I guess I'll say. But yeah, you just keep on pumping out some really cool stuff. Oh, there you go.
Unicorn Vampire.
Yeah, definitely get in on that. I guess when it comes to the book actually getting out to people, again, I'm always so impressed when people can get the book done before the end of the campaign, which, as you mentioned, 2 pages, take a couple of days per page, I would imagine. So before the end of the campaign, should be all done. When is your expected date to be sending out digital rewards, physical rewards, and all that kind of stuff?
So I expect I'll send out the digital rewards pretty quickly. I usually I'll probably send out the survey on this campaign about 2 weeks after the campaign ends, just to make sure everything's cleared. And then
Nice.
so I'll probably send out the digital rewards right away because the book will be done. But then I've set the estimated delivery date for the physical books at July, but it's hopefully it'll be sooner than that. Really, the thing is, once the Kickstarter money comes in, as soon as that happens, I'm ordering the books, and then at that point, it's like a little bit out of my hands. I'm working with printers that I've worked with before, but there's always unforeseen delays.
Yes.
Not too long ago, I had some delays on a printer that I don't think it was necessarily anybody's fault. Like some things happened, but it took quite a lot longer to get my books than I anticipated, and that sometimes happens. Um, so I'd love to think that I would get people their books within 2 months of the Kickstarter ending. Um, that's my goal. Whether or not it happens, we will see. But
I mean, that is a very good goal to set. And I will definitely knock on wood that everything goes well. I've heard horror stories about printing where something weird goes off the first time and then something's broken or ripped or damaged the second time. So knock on wood, nothing goes wrong. It all just comes in beautiful, and you can just send them out to people. Um, One thing that I think you'll have a unique perspective on. So normally I ask people who are doing their first campaign or maybe their second campaign, how did it feel the first time you got your physical book that you've created, and actually are able to see it? Now, as people can see on screen, you've made 19 Kickstarters.
mhm,
Um, you have backed, well, you've actually backed like nearly 400.
mhm.
Um, for you now, how does it still feel to get the physical copies in? Like, is there still that mass excitement? Is it more cooled off now and you're just sort of, yeah, how does that feel? Because you've had so many.
I mean, it still feels really good. I very recently got in these two books, The Vampire Detective and The Night and the Lion. These were actually the ones that had a little bit of delay, but
Oh,
super. I mean, it always feels really good. So at this point now, I have um, actually four different like complete graphic novels that I have on my shelves here in my office that I've created, which is just a great feeling. Especially something new is
yeah.
always very exciting. I think I would say that you can never quite capture the feeling of the first time you got a comic book that you created in your hands. I mean, it's like in that sense, it might be a little bit like chasing the dragon. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, but that said, it's always very exciting. It's always really cool. And you know, that's one of the things that Lorelai will help me with when I get a bunch of like a palette of books. We go through and we unpack everything, and that's always really fun to do. So, I mean, it's a great feeling. Like ultimately, the thing is that because of the support that I've gotten on Kickstarter over the past 8 years, I've been able. Those four graphic novels that I've made are not they didn't happen like out of nothing, right? Like
Yeah.
that was represents an enormous amount of passion and work on not just my part, but on all the creative teams I work with, plus the people that funded them on Kickstarter.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and so that's a really great feeling. And whenever I get down about like if I'm like if something's not working out the way that I want to, or if some part of the process feels exhausting, I I can look over at my shelf right here and look at those four graphic novels that I made with the help of all those people, and I'm like, damn, even if it's not going exactly the way I want it to right now, like I've created a lot and I'm gonna create a lot, and that's like an amazing feeling.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Like, it's one of those things, because you've been at this for so long. Um, I'm very curious how that feeling evolves. I recently I had an interview with Chip Zdarsky, and he had mentioned how he feels that sort of the comics industry has changed, how people tend to not be lifelong comic creators anymore, but they'll jump in, tell the stories they wanted, and then basically back out. By the expression on your face, it feels like you very much disagree, which is awesome.
I
I'm up for different opinions.
I mean, I think that he may be right that people do that. That's not me. I I love Chip Zdarsky. I think he's probably right. I think probably people do jump in and out. I think Chip Zdarsky has a very different perspective than I do.
Fair.
because he was already like an award-winning cartoonist, and then he got swept up into the world of, you know, Marvel comics and
Yep.
and all that stuff, and has since become now this like award-winning writer of comics. And you know, I think he's very talented, and I've met him. Like the first time I met him, you know, I was a stranger and he gave me a big hug, which is crazy. Like
Aw.
that's not what you know, most people do when they meet fans. Um but no, for me, for my like for me personally, comic books are what I want to do. I can, you know, I mean, I there are other things that I like doing. I like writing D&D. I like uh playing card games, all this other stuff, but I don't envision myself as doing comics for now. I am like I used to work, you know, various day jobs,
Mhm.
and people would ask me what I did, and it always felt like the right answer was to say whatever job I was working at that time. But at a certain point, even before I stopped working those jobs, I started just saying I'm a writer. I'm a comic book writer, because my identity. That's how I think of myself.
So,
So yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that chains on to something else that I wanted to ask you. Um, One question I used to ask people was, do you think of yourself as, you know, so and so writer, comic creator, or whatever, comic artist, or so and so who does comics? Clearly, you are Caleb Palmquist, comic writer, comic creator, um, cartoonist, like whatever the term that you want to use is. Um, I guess, what was the moment for you where it became comic creator, not dude who makes comics? Like, do you
Yeah, that's
remember the moment, the event, the accomplishment, whatever it was that made you just go, you know what, I'm a comic creator. I just happen to also work jobs sometimes.
you know, that's a really good question. I don't know. Um,
Right
I
on.
think I think that like probably the first step toward that was when I launched Unicorn Vampire Hunter, which was at the time an extraordinarily successful campaign. It really kind of got me some attention as a creator. And then I think honestly that transition for me happened more because I was over time more and more I used to work as a teacher, and I over time more and
Oh,
more I would be like at work thinking about comics. I would be like bringing my personal laptop with me to work and like pretending to work on you know, grading papers or whatever while I was writing comic scripts. And um and
nice.
it while I think that I did good work in that profession, and I you know, I don't want to dig on teachers at all. It just I knew more and more as time went on that like that wasn't what I was. That wasn't my purpose. That wasn't what I wanted to define me. And I looked around
Mhm.
at and I saw other teachers who, bless them, were passionate, so passionate it like defined them. That was like what they viewed as their core identity, and that's great. And like those are the kind of people that I would love to send, you know, in anyone. I hope anyone's kids go and go to have teachers who are really passionate and really care, and like that's how they view themselves. And it wasn't me. I thought I was an okay teacher, but I all the time I was thinking about, you know, what is Edward the Unicorn going to do next? And
Huh.
um so I think that kind of was like a transition from being like I'm going to teach until I retire to like I'm going to make it work to be a writer.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That is,
Yeah.
it's such a, and again, I haven't been through it. Obviously, I love talking to people who make comics, but I myself have not made a comic, and certainly have not made it my full time job. But there is always a fear and a tension that I've heard about from people where they're like, I would love to do this full time, but my day job pays all of my bills and keeps me comfortable, and I'm comfortable being part time at this. Um, I've also talked with other creators who were like, I like making comics, and like it's super passionate for me, but I also love my day job. And so they're just happy 50-50. And others are like, I just felt like getting this one story out and now I'm happy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's always like a tension at the idea of just doing this full time. So I'm glad you're able to make that work for you. Um, are you lucky enough that just this is what you do? This is your job, or are you still having to work part-time jobs or whatever?
I mean, I'm very fortunate in that uh, I have my partner, Lorelai, has a great career that she loves, and I
Mhm.
make enough money doing this to keep us going. I would say if I wasn't in a relationship with someone who made good money, it probably wouldn't be possible. So I don't want to like spin up false hope for people that like the amount of success I'm having on Kickstarter is enough to like fully fund a person's lifestyle. I mean, it depends. I mean, if I was like single and I had roommates and like was like living frugally, it probably would be enough. But you know, that's your mileage may vary on what you know
Good way to put it.
if you're willing to eat top ramen for every meal or whatever. So yeah, it is. To long story short, it is. This is what I do full time, but I do freelance work and I do
Oh, cool.
various other things from home, editing jobs, things like that to kind of um, tip the
Yeah.
scales a little bit. So it's not. Yeah, no, you know, I'm always trying to do what I can to contribute to the household, as it were.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I have a very supportive family, and that's awesome.
That is awesome. Like, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you've got a partner that is supportive of what you're doing. I'm glad that you also take on, like you said, freelance work and do other stuff to be able to do your part as well as make comics and obviously get paid from that, which is wicked. Um, Now, earlier you mentioned your partner Lorelai is also a novelist. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Um, uh, we're in like we got about 18 minutes left. Given that they are also co-creator of this book, I'd love to do a quick shout out for them.
Yeah.
What type of books do they write? I imagine it's fantasy, given what you've said about her. Um, and
So
where can people find her work?
right. So right now, the main thing that you can read is a book that's being serialized on Substack called Body Swappers. So the Substack is called Root and Branch. So she is
Oh, cool.
both. She's alternating between memoir posts and and a book called Body Swapper. So her memoir posts are about her experience in being in an abusive relationship, um, and um, and sort of different trauma. Um, and then her book, Body Swappers, is I'm going to be pitching this really badly, but it's an urban fantasy.
Okay.
It is about people who are able to um, essentially swap into people's brains, into their minds to control them, but with those people's consent. So basically, people come to this agency, they agree to they like provide some of their DNA so that a crisis management specialist in a crisis can swap into their body and either give them advice or straight up take over their body to control them. So there is a scene in which a woman is worried about being abused by her husband, and then she secretly becomes a client of this crisis management agency. And then when she's being attacked by her husband, like says her code word, and an agent swaps into her body and is able to physically defend her against her husband, and then is actually also able to act as a witness in court against the abusive husband. And so it's a very cool
Yeah.
sort of fantasy sci-fi concept. Um, it's like a mystery and sort of like a crime drama. Yeah, it's super cool, and it's being published serially on her Substack, which you've got up there right now. And then she also has, if you're a subscriber, she has her next level of memoir posts, which get into the nitty gritty of her trauma that is like maybe a little bit trigger warning. So that's why it's sort of behind that subscriber wall.
Fair. Well, one, it is extremely kind of her to share those sort of memoir posts and integrate likely some not fantastic life experiences, as well as thoughts that she's had about, you know, trigger warning, abuse, those kinds of things into her story. One, people should go check it out, follow, subscribe, read, enjoy. There's Dragon Grit right there. Given the rather intense subject matter of this kind of work, will Dragon Grit get into some fairly dark stuff, or will it be more light and like cowboy westerny? I love the pensive look on your face.
So I will say that from my writing, if you've read, I don't know how much of Unicorn Vampire Hunter you've read.
Fair bit of it. I believe all of it.
So okay, great. So then you know that I can really get into some pretty intense emotional stuff in terms of people's relationships. And so I'm bringing that to this, and then also she's bringing her experience. And so I would say that when we're talking about the relationship between Vera, the main character, and Jack, her old rival, there's some pretty intense stuff there. But then also, as the story goes on, you're going to find out that they both came up in a gang under another guy named Silas, who
Good name.
definitely has. Thank you. That was her idea. All the best stuff in the book is her idea.
Love it.
And there's definitely like an abuser relationship going on there. Where there's sort of like you get into ideas of like cult mentality, which is stuff that she explores in her novel and in her memoir stuff. And I would say that that's not necessarily a main theme of Dragon Grit, but it's definitely something that we get into. And so what I would say is that it's about the same level as Unicorn Vampire Hunter in terms of intensity, because if you read Unicorn Vampire Hunter, especially like issue 4 gets into some like dark familial stuff. And Dragon Grit is going to have that same, hopefully very emotional. Hopefully it will make you feel things, and it will make you cheer for the characters, and also hate some of the characters. Hopefully all those things are true. I was just talking to Kay today, and I was, we were talking about some stuff that's going to happen in issue like 8 and 9, and I was like, it's always my goal to just emotionally throat punch my readers. So,
well, you know what? Given what you've just told me, I have no doubt you'll be able to achieve that. I definitely remember in Unicorn Vampire Hunter, because of the artistic style, one was not ready for that to go that way, and when it did, it was like, oh my god, like we're going there. And it really, that's what stuck with me. That's why, like, when your agent reached out to have you on, I was like, yeah, I'm having Caleb back on. So that's fascinating, and I'm super excited. I'm also glad that the art style has gotten, I would say, a little more mature, I guess would be the right word. It's less cartoony, more detailed. Well, I'm also looking at a giant, red dragon drawing. But yeah, like I think the tone of this world will be very interesting, and I look forward to seeing how it all plays out. Um, Given the level of detail in the script that the both of you produced, like you said, you had to drop a lot of it just because you're going from a prose literature piece to a comic book. I'm very curious if, and I love asking about like, um, not spoilers, Easter eggs and stuff. Is there stuff that has been included in panels throughout the series, throughout issue one, where we'll see it and just go, "Oh, that's a cool thing that they have on their belt," or maybe that Blaze has on his saddle, um, but like has far deeper meanings, and how often is stuff like that included?
That's a good question. There's definitely a decent amount of seeds that we're planting, because, like I said, I mean,
Mm.
certainly, when you talk about writing styles, people talk about being a scripter or like a plotter or a pantser, where it's like you're either, if you've heard those terms before, I don't know if you have, um, but in the novel writing world, like a plotter is someone who like sits down and figures out the whole story before they start writing, whereas like
Oh,
a pantser is like by the seat of your pants.
yeah,
They
you're going.
they just like kind of come up
Oh.
with stuff as they go along. And I am 100% like a plotter. Like I don't write comics until I know where the story is going. At the very least, like one arc at a time. And certainly for Dragon Grit, we have the whole thing planned out. So we're definitely planting seeds that I think are going to be important. And we're doing something really cool starting in issue 2. I'm like hyping up something that is going to be a few months out, but we're doing something really cool with the story in terms of how we're doing, how you learn about the backstory. Um,
Oh.
in a way that I think is going to feel like everything is going to build to the finale in a way that's going to be very satisfying, um, and like emotionally intense. Uh, Something I haven't done before. I don't want to
Ooh.
necessarily
Yeah,
reveal
no,
it
no
yet.
spoilers. Don't get in trouble. Um,
uh, but
exciting though.
yeah, so I would say, there will be little things in issue 1 that are going to matter, and as we move on, there's going to be more and more seeds dropped about what's coming. Um, so yeah, hopefully, if we've done our jobs correctly, um, by the time you get to issue 10, which might be 2 years from now, um, we we will have done our job so well that it will like really feel like everything was really earned, and you can go back through and read it and see like, oh yeah, like they were planting the seeds the whole time.
I love it. I love the way that you're even talking about it with planting seeds and then sort of building that and earning it. Um, so here's a maybe a not great or nice question. One thing that I've come across when I'm reading comics, the one that most embodies this for me, is a Grant Morrison series for DC. Um, oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on it. Hold on, bear with me. I want to make sure I get the title right here. Multiversity. That's the one.
Okay.
Bear with me, because it's super cool. So this is just a wiki page for it, but that's the cover for the first one.
Hmm.
Um, basically, Grant Morrison had talked about in his book Super Gods, the actual medium of comic books and how reading a comic issue by issue, right? Like actual issue by issue, and not just here's a graphic novel with everything. How it feels different, how it's built different. Um, And with your work, what I've noticed, you mentioned you've got 4 graphic novels on your shelf, is you will put them all out. So in the case of Dragon Grit, um, as long as all goes well, and given the 18 previous successful Kickstarters, no doubt, um, once the 10th one is done, it'll be graphic novelized or whatever you want to call it, collected. Um, are you when you're building them and keeping that building in mind and planting those seeds? Are you keeping in mind how the reader will read it, such that issue by issue may be a superior story? Or when it comes to your storytelling, do you think it'll matter, and just as long as they can get it, it'll end up having the same impact?
Well, What I'll tell you is that I have written books both as issue and as a full graphic novel. So, for example, The Knight and the Lion, was always conceived as a full graphic novel
Okay.
and was created that way. And I think if I gun to my head, I could have separated it into issues, but I don't think it would have worked as well.
Oh, okay.
And it's like some of the chapters are shorter, like there's like a 10-page chapter and then like a 30-page chapter, like and so I would say that I definitely am writing these things as issue by issue, like they can be enjoyed that way. And each issue has like a focus and an idea behind it. Whether or not it's better as single issues or better as a collected edition, it's hard to say. I work hard at giving each issue its own identity, but I think Grant Morrison has like a lot of big brain ideas about.
Yes, yes, he does.
Grant Morrison to me feels like kind of like a famous movie director, because like a lot of like sometimes like people like Spielberg or whatever will have ideas about how movies are meant to be consumed, right? Like, oh, you've got to be in the theater. I know that Christopher Nolan is famous for like really insisting that the movies be in theaters. And was like really mad when HBO Max was like doing their like direct to streaming with movies. And I don't know that I have as strong of opinions about that. But I will say that I definitely do write different. If I know that it's only ever going to be consumed as a graphic novel versus I know that it's going to be single issues and then be a graphic novel, the way that I write is very different.
Interesting. That's cool. I love not only like reading comics and consuming them, and like that's why I'm excited for Dragon Grit because it sounds like a wicked book. But I love the behind the scenes and the shift in mentality about it. So given that you think of them differently, I am sure that with how Dragon Grit is coming out and will eventually be coming out, whether you're conscious of it or not, I'm sure you've compensated in ways, which is just really cool for me. That being said, Caleb, we've got like 3 minutes or less left. I guess one thing I would love to ask you, because I feel like between yourself and your partner, you're probably really big nerds, and that makes me happy. What is one thing in your collection, whether it's comics, novels, figures, prints, whatever you're into? What's one thing in your collection that may not be the most valuable, may not be the most rare, but the thing that makes you most happy?
So if it comes to comics, I want to say that I have a copy of Giant X-Men number 300.
Oh, okay.
Which is I'm not even sure that it's a first printing, but it's just like, it's like a piece of comic book history that I think is cool. That's the one, I think it's 300. It's the one where they're all like jumping out of the page and it's got, like Colossus and Nightcrawler and Storm. I could be, it's like giant size X-Men.
Oh,
I might have the number wrong. That shows.
I think you're referring to this one.
Yeah, that's it. So it's not
very cool.
Why did I think it was number 300? It's number 1. Anyway,
I'm interested what number 300 you have that you also really like.
It must be something else. But yeah, no, I have that because I used to have a lot of X-Men comics and Spider-Man comics, and I ended up like selling a lot of them because they were just sitting around in boxes, and I moved across the country and I was like, but that one I held on to because I just like, I'm a big fan of that era of X-Men.
That's awesome. And then I guess with the last couple of minutes, I'll give you my last two questions to wrap up our interview today. So Caleb, currently, when you're not, being a madman and writing tons of comics and working freelance and being a family man and raising dogs, what is it that you're finding the time to enjoy in?
Yeah. So the thing that I have really been enjoying lately is there is a new Star Wars card game that just came out. That's like a collectible card game called Star Wars Unlimited. That I'm like a sucker for a card game. I love local game stores and just kind of that community space, like making friends, just playing like, there it is. And it's like, when you go to the card shop, you're going to have a dude who's like a top level executive and a dude who works at McDonald's, and they meet, and that doesn't matter. What matters is, does my Boba Fett beat your Vader? Like right now, that's what matters. And that's just super fun. I love that. It's like an equalizer, and we're just coming together, geeking out about something that we like. So that's been something that I've really been enjoying lately.
I love it. That is awesome. Thank you for letting me know about that. And then I guess my last question, Caleb, is simply going to be, who do you think we should have on the show next?
Oh my goodness. I have a couple of suggestions. Have you ever had Curtis Clow on your show? He is the writer. It's Curtis, how you think it's spelled, and then CLOW.
Clow. Oh, that is actually what I thought. Curtis Clow. I have not.
He is the writer of a book called Beastlands, which is it's on Kickstarter right now. But he's like incredibly talented writer. He's a good friend of mine. And then the other person, honestly, that I would seriously recommend having, who's someone who lives in Washington State where I live, is Camry Lapka. I don't know if you've heard of Camry or seen their work, but Camry actually drew the sticker that's on my campaign and draws an exclusive comic for my subscribers to my subscription program that I have.
Oh, cool.
Camry's got a comic called George Smith, Paranormal Investigator of the Pacific Northwest, on Kickstarter right now, which is really great. It takes place in Port Angeles in Washington, which is the same city that Lorelai and I went on our honeymoon, which is like a fun little coincidence.
Yeah.
So Camry and Curtis are two really awesome people that I would absolutely recommend having on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Caleb. I will be sure to reach out. Before we wrap up the show, one more time for me, let the people know the minimum buy-in they can do to get Dragon Grit.
You can back for $8 to get the digital comic if you just want to read it, or $14 American, to be clear, to get the to get the physical edition of the comic.
I love it. Well, Caleb, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time once again to come on the show. It was a blast having you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And for the folks at home, do remember, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of Caleb, what you think of the vast collection of his other work, and what you are excited for about Dragon Grit. And of course, we'll see you next time.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter column.